I have lived long enough with superhero films to recognize instability when I see it. Over the past few years, the genre has become a land of extremes. Brief flashes of excitement, followed by long stretches of disappointment. Success feels accidental now, not earned. Even the largest franchises stumble, and faith in the idea of a guaranteed hit has quietly disappeared. So when Superman was announced yet again, reborn under a new creative vision, I didn't feel hope, I felt caution. The kind shaped by memory, by past missteps, by the weight of expectation that no cape seems able to escape. DC in particular had reached a crossroads. After years of uneven direction and fractured storytelling, the studio faced a stark choice: rebuild from the ground up or fade further into irrelevance. That responsibility landed on James Gunn's shoulders, a director known for humor, humanity, and an instinct for flawed heroes. Yet the challenge before him was unlike anything he had faced before. Superman is not an underdog. He is not obscure. He is myth, legacy, and cultural symbol. And above all, he is haunted by comparison. The shadow of previous incarnations, especially the most recent, loomed impossibly large. I expected resistance. I expected division. What I did not expect was to be quietly disarmed. This Superman does not arrive as a triumphant savior. He enters the story already tested, already bruised. The film opens not with glory, but with defeat, an image that immediately reframes everything I thought I knew. In the frozen isolation of the Fortress of Solitude, the Man of Steel falls for the first time. Not symbolically, not emotionally, physically, viscerally. He is overpowered by a mysterious adversary, and for a moment, the impossible becomes real. Superman can lose. That loss is not random. Weeks earlier, he had acted on instinct, stopping an invasion before it could consume innocent lives. It was the kind of decision Superman has always made: swift, compassionate, unquestioning. Yet this time, the world did not respond with gratitude. Governments accused him of interference. Political lines were drawn. Media outlets reshaped the narrative with alarming speed. The hero became controversial. The savior became suspect. Watching this unfold, I realized the film wasn't asking whether Superman could save the world. It was asking whether the world still wanted saving. Public opinion turned quickly, and with it came the most dangerous weapon of all: doubt. Superman was no longer attacked for what he did, but for who he was. Questions about his origins resurfaced, amplified by voices eager to exploit fear. And then Lex Luthor emerged not with fists or armies, but with precision, with words, with information timed perfectly to wound. A long-lost recording from Superman's biological parents was revealed to the public, suggesting that his arrival on Earth may have carried motives far darker than anyone believed. The implication alone was enough. Intent became suspicion. Suspicion became condemnation. In a single stroke, Superman's identity was fractured before the eyes of humanity, and I watched him stand there, exposed, stripped of certainty, forced into a choice no god should have to make. Should he continue to believe in the values he has always embodied, even as the world turns its back on him? Or should he finally surrender to the silence and let humanity decide its own fate without him? This is where James Gunn's vision becomes unmistakably clear. He does not treat Superman as an untouchable icon. He treats him as a being capable of pain, capable of shame, capable of heartbreak. The cape remains, the strength remains, but beneath it all is a man struggling to understand whether goodness still has a place in a world that no longer trusts it. And in that moment, I realized something quietly profound. This was not a story about saving the world. It was a story about whether hope itself deserves to be saved. What struck me most as the story unfolded was not the scale of the conflict, but the intimacy of it. James Gunn makes a deliberate choice here. He refuses to hide Superman behind spectacle. Instead, he brings the camera closer, forcing me to sit with the man beneath the symbol. This Superman is not defined by invincibility. He is defined by uncertainty, by emotional exposure, by the quiet weight of being misunderstood. I watched him wrestle with questions no amount of strength could answer. If his intentions are doubted, does intention still matter? If his goodness is questioned, does he continue to give it freely? These doubts do not explode outward. They settle inward, heavy and unresolved. Gunn understands that true conflict does not always need destruction. Sometimes, it only needs silence. David Corenswet's performance is central to this transformation. There is no arrogance in his Superman, no performative confidence. What I see instead is restraint. His expressions linger. His eyes speak before his words do. When the truth about his parents surfaces, he does not deny it, nor does he rage against it. He absorbs it. And in that absorption, I see something deeply human. He allows himself to grieve. He allows himself to hurt, even to cry. Not because he is weak, but because he finally permits himself to feel. This choice redefines Superman in a way that feels both radical and faithful. Gunn does not strip away the myth. He softens it, rounds its edges, lets vulnerability coexist with power. Superman here is capable of anger, yes, but also of embarrassment. He can be naive. He can be hurt by words. He can feel small in a world that insists on reducing him to a headline. What makes this portrayal convincing is that the film never mocks him for it. His sensitivity is not treated as a flaw to be corrected. It is treated as a cost of caring too much. And that distinction matters. It reframes heroism not as dominance, but as endurance. This emotional grounding extends into the film's handling of relationships, especially with Lois Lane. She is not positioned as an accessory to Superman's journey, but as a necessary counterweight. Intelligent, uncompromising, and deeply principled, Lois refuses to shield him from hard truths. When they argue about his intervention in global conflict, she does not soften her stance out of love, she challenges his moral simplicity with journalistic clarity. Watching them clash, I felt the tension between idealism and reality sharpen into something meaningful. Lois becomes the bridge between Superman and humanity. Through her, he confronts the uncomfortable truth that good intentions can still carry consequences. She shows him the world not as he wishes it to be, but as it is messy, political, often unfair. Yet she also reminds him that meaning is not erased by imperfection. It is shaped by it. The film's decision to avoid retelling Superman's origin story further reinforces this maturity. There is no need to explain who he is. We already know. What matters now is who he chooses to be. With that freedom, Gunn introduces a wider cast of characters, each carrying their own philosophies and boundaries. They are not decorative. They exist to reflect different responses to crisis, different interpretations of responsibility. Some are bound by rules, unwilling to interfere beyond their mandate. Others are driven by personal loyalty, prepared to sacrifice anything for those they love. None of them are framed as entirely right or wrong. They simply are. And in their contrasts, Superman's dilemma becomes clearer. He stands alone not because he is stronger, but because he refuses to stop believing in something uncomplicated, that helping others is reason enough. As I followed this version of Superman, stripped of certainty yet still standing, I felt the film guiding me toward a quiet conclusion. True strength, it suggests, is not the absence of doubt. It is the decision to act despite it. And in a world eager to question sincerity, perhaps the bravest thing Superman can do is remain sincere anyway. If Superman represents the question of hope, then Lex Luthor embodies the answer the world is often too afraid to admit it prefers. Watching him emerge in this story, I understood immediately that this was not a villain built on spectacle or rage. He does not shout, he does not threaten, he reasons, and that is precisely what makes him dangerous. This version of Lex Luthor is calm, intelligent, and relentlessly logical. He believes in systems, in control, in the idea that humanity must define its own future without leaning on miracles. To him, Superman is not a hero, but a distortion, an interruption in human evolution, a being whose existence undermines accountability, whose presence invites dependency. Luthor does not hate Superman because he is powerful. He hates him because people love him. Listening to Luthor speak, I realized how carefully the film positions his ideology. His arguments are not hollow. They are persuasive. He frames Superman as a threat, not through fear, but through philosophy. If humanity relies on an alien savior, then humanity forfeits its right to grow. In his mind, removing Superman is not cruelty, it is necessity, yet beneath that polished conviction lies something far more fragile: envy. Luthor is painfully aware that no matter how brilliant he is, no matter how much influence he amasses, he will never inspire the kind of unconditional faith that Superman does. And that truth corrodes him from the inside. He disguises insecurity as righteousness, obsession as principle. The brilliance of this portrayal lies in its restraint. Luthor rarely resorts to violence himself. He manipulates perception. He orchestrates chaos while standing apart from it. When he speaks of humanity's freedom, his actions quietly betray him. He is willing to sacrifice innocence, distort truth, and dehumanize others to achieve his vision of autonomy. In trying to prove that humanity does not need Superman, he becomes the clearest example of what happens when compassion is removed from power. This ideological clash sits at the heart of the film. Superman and Luthor are not opposites because one is good and the other is evil. They are opposites because they answer the same question differently. What does humanity need? Superman answers with trust. Luthor answers with control. As the conflict escalates, the film refuses to simplify their opposition. Superman does not immediately refute Luthor's arguments. He listens, he absorbs them, and in doing so, he is forced to confront a painful possibility. What if his presence truly causes harm, even unintentionally? What if being good is not enough? This internal struggle deepens the stakes far beyond physical confrontation. When Superman faces engineered threats designed to mirror and challenge his power, the spectacle is impressive, but it is never the point. What matters is what these encounters represent. Each battle becomes a test of belief rather than strength. Can Superman continue to act with compassion in a world that increasingly frames compassion as weakness? Visually, these sequences are ambitious. The film moves between grounded reality and controlled artificial environments shaped by Luthor's intellect. Some moments feel overwhelming, deliberately so. The scale reflects Luthor's desire to contain and dominate the unknown, yet not all of it lands perfectly. There are instances where the reliance on visual effects becomes noticeable, pulling me briefly out of the experience. Still, the intent remains clear. This is a war of ideas disguised as action. What I found most unsettling is how familiar Luthor's worldview feels. His skepticism toward symbols, his insistence on self-reliance, his discomfort with moral absolutes. These are not foreign concepts. They echo real conversations, real anxieties. And that is why Superman's response matters. He does not defeat Luthor by proving him wrong through force. He defeats him by refusing to become what Luthor expects. He chooses empathy when efficiency would be easier. He chooses restraint when dominance would be justified. In doing so, he exposes the flaw at the center of Luthor's logic. A world without hope may function, but it does not heal. By the time their conflict reaches its emotional peak, I no longer see a hero fighting a villain. I see two visions of humanity colliding, one built on fear of dependency, the other built on faith in connection. And as the dust settles, the film leaves me with an unsettling realization. The greatest threat to humanity is not power without limits, but intelligence without empathy. By the time the story begins to settle, I realize that this film is no longer asking whether Superman can win. That question was answered long ago. What it asks instead is quieter, heavier, and far more difficult. Why should Superman exist at all? In a world that doubts him, politicizes him, and reshapes his actions into controversy, what purpose does he truly serve? James Gunn does not offer a grand speech or a single defining moment to answer that question. He allows the answer to emerge through action, through choice, through restraint. Superman does not reclaim his place by demanding belief. He earns it again, one small decision at a time. There is a moment that lingers with me long after the credits roll. A building stands on the edge of collapse. No armies are watching. No cameras frame the rescue as a symbol. There is only a woman trapped inside, afraid, powerless, unseen. Superman lifts the structure not as a god asserting dominance, but as a guardian fulfilling a promise. In that moment, I understand something fundamental. Superman does not save the world because it worships him. He saves it because someone needs help. This clarity reframes everything that came before. His naivety, once criticized as weakness, becomes purity. His refusal to abandon hope, even when mocked, becomes defiance of the most meaningful kind. Superman is not blind to humanity's flaws. He sees them clearly. He simply chooses not to let those flaws define his response. The film's visual language supports this conclusion with deliberate care. Familiar landmarks return, not as empty nostalgia, but as continuity of memory. The Fortress of Solitude rising from the ice. The Daily Planet standing proud against the skyline. These images are reminders that Superman has always existed within a shared cultural imagination. James Gunn does not discard the past. He converses with it. The music completes that conversation. When the legendary theme resurfaces, it does not overwhelm the moment. It reassures it. The melody carries a sense of inherited optimism, a reminder of why Superman once represented uncomplicated hope. Here, that hope is not naive. It is earned, tempered by doubt, strengthened by choice. Yet the film is not without imperfections. Its ambition occasionally stretches it thin. The number of characters, themes, and future threads can feel overwhelming, especially for those unfamiliar with the mythology. Some sequences rely heavily on visual effects, and not all of them achieve the same level of realism or weight, but these flaws do not undermine the heart of the story. They reflect a film reaching forward, sometimes too eagerly, but always sincerely. As the narrative closes, I find myself reflecting not on the spectacle, but on the message left behind. Superman is not presented as a solution to humanity's problems. He is presented as a mirror. He reflects who we wish we could be when fear is stripped away, when kindness is not strategic, when helping others is not conditional. In this telling, Superman exists not to dominate the sky, but to walk beside humanity as it stumbles forward. He is powerful, yes, but his true strength lies in his refusal to surrender empathy, even when empathy costs him everything. That is why this film matters. Not because it reboots a franchise, not because it promises a brighter cinematic future. It matters because it remembers something simple and easily forgotten. Hope is not outdated. Sincerity is not weakness. And belief, when chosen freely, can still move the world. As I step away from this story, I do not feel overwhelmed by anticipation. I feel something quieter and far more rare. I feel reassured that Superman still has a place. And perhaps that so do we.